I grew up in Compton, in California, which is considered the inner city of Los Angeles. Most people would regard it as a rough neighborhood, but for me it was a beautiful place. I had an amazing childhood, surrounded by family and friends and happy times. I did not go to film school, a traditional film school. I educated myself about filmmaking through being on the sets of other filmmakers. I originally was a publicist. When I graduated from college, I got into film publicity. I loved film, so I just wanted to work around it, but I never thought that I could be the filmmaker. So I started to work on film sets as a publicist and work in the studio system, publicizing and amplifying other filmmakers' work. And through doing that, I found myself on many sets, many long conversations with filmmakers on plane rides to their premieres, junkets, interviews, all of the things that I coordinated as a publicist allowed me a certain proximity to filmmakers. I started to become enamored with it and believed that I could do it too. I started with documentaries. I thought it would be safe to start with something that I knew, and the documentary that I made as my very first film was chronicling a very kind of thriving but little known art scene where I was from in South Central, and all of the people in the scene I knew personally. I was a young poet at the time, experimenting with hip hop and really, a part of the hip hop generation at that time, really loving what the music was expressing. Felt like it was speaking to and for me, and so at that time I was, practicing art making for the very first time. The second film that I made, I Will Follow, my first narrative film, I had been saving money for a house. My mother kept saying, "Do you know I bought my first house when I was 25 years old?" "Yeah, Mom, I know." And I decided to make a film with that money instead. So she wasn't very happy about it then, but she's happy now. It all worked out. I like a sense of independence, and that comes from doing things well and yourself. And I like to know all of the parts of the process. So by, writing, directing, producing, financing, distributing, and publicizing my own first films really gave me, a grasp of the full filmmaking process and the craft of it. The interesting thing about Selma is that in the making of the film, it felt very much like an independent film. This is a film about a international hero, but certainly it's a part of American history, and it was financed by French financiers, by Pathé, and they were all the way in France and in London. My father's from Montgomery, Alabama, which is very close to Selma. I was an African American studies major at UCLA. So I knew the African American history of it, knew the American history, the place it held, but I also knew the place itself because I'd visited that part of the country so many times as a child on holidays and birthdays and summer vacations with my dad, going back to his birthplace. And so I felt like I really had a handle on what I wanted to tell about that time in history. As a woman, as a Black woman filmmaker, there aren't a lot of us. And so I found that the reason why there aren't a lot of us is because there isn't a lot of support. And so instead of not doing something, I just figure out a way to do it without the support. And as you venture into these spaces and as you start to create your own work, like-minded people come around you and you attract support and help and assistance and all of those things that you need. But you can never attract those things if you're just sitting still. You have to be moving and you have to be doing something in order to draw it to you. And so I always just try to keep moving and keep creating. Well, for the films that I distribute for other filmmakers, the landscape has completely changed from what it was when I first started the distribution company in 2010, where in 2015, you have Netflix on the scene, Amazon on the scene, all of these platforms where you can stream. And it was around back then, but the audiences were like, I don't know about watching things on my computer. Now, everybody's watching things on their computer. New ways to have art reach audiences. The traditional walls have all collapsed. And so everyone's trying to figure out now what's the new way. It's an incredible time to be an artist, incredible time to be a filmmaker, and especially for people who had been left out of the old school, the old model, women, people of color. Now, everything's open, so it's on us. It's upon us to figure out where we want to be, to insert ourselves into the process, create new paths, and I find it very exciting. And we've had a lot of success doing that, to think about, well, I'm not going to continue knocking on that old door that doesn't open for me. I'm going to create my own door and walk through that. And that's really what we've tried to do, and it's been a great ride. A piece of advice, I always say the same thing. It's to work without permission. So many of us work from a permission-based place, and we don't even know it. We're waiting for someone to say it's okay, waiting for someone to give us a green light, give us money, tell us how to do it, shepherd us through. And, if you're waiting for that, some people get lucky. But most of us have to do it for ourselves. And the sooner you realize that, and the sooner you step out and begin, just begin, you will start to find your momentum. I mean, it's a very simple piece of advice, but so often I hear people saying, oh, how do I get started? How do I do this? How do you do it? You just start. You have to begin. And it won't be perfect, and it'll be messy, and it'll be hard, but you're doing something and you're on your way.